So, hello. This is a follow-up video to my Curb the Crunch video that I posted a couple of days ago. Because one person wrote in the comments that the reason why they were still playing DSA 4.1 was because they had decided not to follow on to DSA 5th edition, and that when 5th edition was first announced, and this is something that I cannot remember because at the time I was living in Ireland and DSA wasn't really happening in English at the time. There was a Kickstarter later, but apparently the 5th edition had been discussed for a good while in Germany, obviously, and back then people had been told you just need the basic rules and the almanac. I didn't even mention the almanac. I've got, I think, 2 of them. I don't know if there are more than 2. It could be that they've also expanded this, but basically word and discussion at the time seems to have been that you can play 5th edition with just the core rulebook and the almanac, which would mean 2 books. As I said, that's not true, because if you want to have a full set of clerics, you would need at least Divine Magic Part 1, and of course I also went into the bloat that followed after. So this YouTube watcher asked, so what would you recommend? How can companies make money? Companies that produce RPGs, if not through bloating? And honestly, of course, first of all, that's not my job to know, because it's not my business. I don't produce role-playing games. So if they want to make this happen for them, then of course it's their business decision. If they decide to go down the road of bloat, it just means that I will not be supporting them. And I will also not accept people trying to bring in additional stuff if it means more investment from my end, in terms of time, in terms of money, just in order to keep up with developments that this company, this role-playing company, decides to put out. But I would also like to point out that there are companies that do not follow this bloat mechanic. Chaosium is one of them. I mean, RuneQuest hasn't been updated, or hadn't been updated, in a very long time. Now we've got a new edition, which is also a couple of years old now. But I think there are maybe four books out for this, 2 of which are, one is the basic rulebook, and that's really the only thing you need. The core rulebook is all you need. It's hefty, it's big, but it contains everything. There is a starter set, which I really like, because it gives you also 3 different types of adventures. It has the rules in a condensed version. If you buy this, and it's got beautifully crafted pre-gens, and if you buy this and you use it, you will make a decision if this is suitable for your group, and if it is, then you can go on to buy the basic rule book, which is all you need, or you can just say, well, maybe this is not for us, but then you haven't really spent a lot of money. Plus, they also allow you to play a free online solo adventure using all of the rules online in a web browser on their page, and that is a brilliant move on their part, which I really applaud. And then, of course, you've got their flagship, The Call of Cthulhu, which is now in its 7th edition, and that is really it's been around for, I don't even know how long, probably the late 70s. Well, it's been around for as long as, I want to say, Dungeons and Dragons, because there was this dispute of using Cthulhu-esque mythos creatures that Chaosium had the rights to in some way in D&D, and of course Chaosium won, and there is this kind of like this coveted version of the bestiary that contains those Cthulhu-esque mythos monsters. So I haven't researched, I haven't really thought about it, but it's probably around 40-something years old at this stage. So they're on their 7th edition. They haven't put out a lot of bloat. They have really just, I mean, I played the 5th edition rulebook for years. And when I look at the current one, you could play anything from the old editions with this. It's not a problem. It's fully compatible. The only difference is that you would have to take the base statistics, the attributes like strength and so on from the old editions and just multiply them by 5, because they've also been converted to a 100 system from a 20 system. But that's possible. I mean, it's very simple. I've done it multiple times. It's not a problem. They've managed to survive. I would say that they're probably not the get-rich-quickly company, but then again, they're a publisher. That's how this works. It's very simple. Then we could also look at Green Ronin. Green Ronin have now only updated the Fantasy Age book. I'm still waiting for the release date of the pre-order, but when you look at their offering for the Age system, it's rather sparse. You've got a couple of books. You've got the basic rule book for all of their Fantasy Age, Dragon Age, Modern Age, Blue Rose systems, as it were. And then you've got maybe 3 or 4 expansions to that, which you don't really need. I mean, the bestiary I would recommend. The compendium or companion or whatever it's called is a nice to have, but having said this, they have incorporated it in the 2nd edition of Fantasy Age, so you will not have to buy a 2nd book. I really liked the campaign builder, but that's just because I'm interested in this kind of information on how to build campaigns, how to build adventures, advice on that. But it's not necessary. I mean, you don't need this at all. What they do not put out is actually adventure parts. So there are a couple of adventure supplements, like very short ones, 4 pages long for Fantasy Age, that I've looked at for like, I don't know, $3. It's just PDF. You can't get them as a book. There is more stuff, I believe, for Blue Rose. I haven't really looked into Blue Rose because it's simply not my thing. But, you know, there is at least one book about the city of Aldis, which is the central, as I understand it, the central place where the story is set. And that's there. And I believe that there may be a couple of adventures. I saw some adventures for Modern Age for threefold online on Drive through RPG. I think they sell for $20 or something, all of them together. Again, they're not going to get rich over this, but this is the point. How do they make money? What is their business model? I honestly don't know, but either they are like, okay, well, we are so small and this is enough for us and we just, you know, are fine with what we're making, or they have a secret ingredient which they're not sharing and with anyone except Chaosium. So it seems maybe the two of them, I'm just making this up, by the way. I don't know if Chaosium and Green Ronin actually work together in any shape or form. But honestly, as a consumer, I don't really need to give advice to those companies. The only thing that I can say is, sorry, what you're doing is completely ridiculous and off the charts annoying, and I will not support this. And I will actually not invest in this anymore. I will go somewhere else. I will play a different system. And there are so many out there, from very, very old school, like dungeon crawl classics, which are so old school that they're too old school for me, to highly intricate games that are very modern, like Fantasy Age. It's got a very modern rule system, you know, enough diversification without going completely overboard, without complicating things, because I'm not somebody who actually wants to delve into like hundreds and hundreds of specifics and feats and whatnot. So Pathfinder isn't for me. I played Pathfinder first edition for years, and I also DM'd it, but you know, I'm no longer interested because I just found it very, very complex to the degree that I was like, well, I don't need this. It doesn't add anything to my player or DM experience. So if you want to make money, then you will probably have to find a different outlet for your creativity, because there isn't that much money to be made in RPGs unless you go down the road of aggressively monetizing by putting out stuff that appeals to the FOMO, that appeals to the players, that appeals to people who believe that they need to invest more in order to become better and in order to win at the game. And I think this is something that we see in the video game area, as well as, let's say, Games Workshop is doing this as well. You know, Games Workshop is making huge amounts of money off of their IP. Not necessarily the game anymore, because apparently the game has become unplayable at this stage. I have played some GW, and it's also on this channel, but not the flagship, as it were, Warhammer 40k or Warhammer Fantasy, because I'm simply not interested. I played the Lord of the Rings strategy battle game, which I really liked. But I mean, look at other companies that make something for a hobby where you do not have to reinvest all the time. Let's say you produce golf clubs. Once I've got a set of golf clubs, I'm probably not going to buy another one for a very, very long time, because they are sturdy and they usually last a very long time. So what about golf club producers? Well, I suppose one way of making more money is expanding the player base, getting more people into golf. And I think this is probably what companies should do when they are in the role-playing area, to bring people in and to make the game interesting and to attract people to the hobby. There are various ways in which you can do this. Cons are one thing and one way. But also because it was mentioned, you know, game supplements, so adventures don't sell well. Well, they wouldn't sell terribly well, because usually at a table of 5, only one person will buy them. So because it's the DM that reads them and nobody else. But especially for Ulysses, my advice is it would be good if you actually produced good adventures, because the quality there is terribly lacking, both with regard to the content. Neobaras Vermächtnis, there is a review of this one, and Donnerwacht on my channel as well. They're both terrible. Neobaras Vermächtnis is actually unplayable. And I think if Ulysses were honest, they would say, everybody who's got the book, tear off the cover, send it in, and we refund you. Because the book contains, it's quite expensive, it's a hardcover, it looks beautiful, but it's completely unplayable. And basically, we should all get our money back for it, because it's a disaster. Sternenträger, actually not much better. It's less unplayable, but it took them ages to actually produce it. And I think that, I don't even know if they've managed to produce every single book at this stage. Donnerwacht, Zeichen der Macht, absolutely ridiculous. Really bad. Not as bad as Neobaras Vermächtnis. I think Neobaras Vermächtnis will always be my unholy grail of everything that can be done wrong has been done wrong, and then they put on another level of wrongness on top. So I think the answer to the question, what would be a less greedy business model, would be not to invest or not to prey on the players like that. Because, as has been said by other people, a lot of people in our hobby, like role-playing, but also computer gaming, DLCs, loot boxes, etc., but also wargaming, you know, those niche, kind of nerdy hobbies quite often attract people with neurodiverse makeup, a lot of whom have problems with impulse buying control. I didn't realize this. I heard it first on another channel, and I did some research, and this is actually true. So, and I'm not saying that Ulysses is especially preying on them, but definitely WotC is going to do this in the 1D&D. That's definitely where they're heading. And it works for Games Workshop as well, really well. But it goes in that same direction, you know, and I understand that they want to make money. But I also have to say that there is a reason for me to go, I am just going to take a system that is closed. I can always go in and add my own with a player, for example, because in 2019, I set up a group to play a large, quite epic storyline in the world of DSA, Das Schwarze Auge, the Dark Eye. And one of the players wanted to play, or wanted to kind of import, as it were, a character from another game that was very specific. It was a barbarian type fighter person who was a blacksmith that was magical in a way, that could use magic. Now, this thing doesn't exist in DSA. It didn't exist, at least at the time. But I thought, that's a really interesting concept. So we sat down, we looked at basically what should this character be able to do? What can the rules give us? Because it shouldn't be, since it doesn't exist at the moment, it shouldn't be completely OP. It shouldn't be like a super fighter, super magic user, super smith that could then maybe craft weapons that are kind of magical for everybody and then completely, overpower the whole game. Because DSA is not like D&D, for example, where you find lots of magical weapons all the time. So it's not like that. It's a lot less magical. It's a lot more low fantasy in a way. And so we sat down and we came up with this concept with some spells or magical abilities that this character had. And they only, I think, used it once or twice, basically, to craft a weapon, only once. And that was even part of the story. So we wove it in. It actually fit with my narrative that I was trying to tell. And then, a couple of, like cantrips that made sense for a smith, that you can also use if you are smart enough in other situations, but that don't overpower this character. It worked. Years later, the so-called Zauberschmied or magical smith became a class that you can buy. It's in one of the books. I don't even think I've got the book that it's in, but essentially now it exists. I have never looked at it because I don't care, because we built it ourselves. And that's what a lot of this is about. And apparently, and I never, and of course it's an apocryphal quote, but apparently Gary Gygax once said, "We must never tell DMs that they don't actually need us, and we must never tell players that they don't actually need us." But it's true. When you produce a rule set and you just throw it out, you have done your job. That's it. The trick is to make the rule set so good and so robust that it can be used in very many different contexts. It's a little bit like this discussion around Games Workshop, where apparently, and I didn't know this, if you want to play a war game and you go to a Games Workshop store, you can only play with the approved miniatures and the approved games that come from Games Workshop. You can't just go there like to a hobby place and say, oh, I want to play a skirmish game or a strategy battle game, but I'm going to play one-page rules or 5 parsecs from home or something like that. Because they insist that you play only the approved games that are from Games Workshop. So it's not a hobby space, it's a Games Workshop dedicated space, which is fair enough because it's a Games Workshop shop. So please feel free to make those decisions. But I wasn't aware of this. But I believe that the way to go is, if you want to be successful, you have to provide something that is open and lets people take the basics. Because I think coming up with a robust rule set for any game is the hardest. I mean, there is something called, I think, 5 Leagues from the Border, it's just a rule set. It's miniatures agnostic. So you can play it with virtually anything. You can bring your Playmobil guys. You can bring your Lego guys, and just, as long as you ensure that the bases are big enough, so that the measuring works well, you can play it with anything. It doesn't matter what it looks like. You could use tokens. It doesn't matter, but you have a robust rule set where you have your group of adventurers that you put together. It's a skirmish game. I've never played it. I'm still waiting for it to become back in stock at my friendly local game store. And then I'm going to buy the rule set just to read it, just for the fun of it. But you could play it with anything. But if the rule set is robust, you will be successful because people will buy it. Because most people will want to have a version of the rules that they can reference, that they can read up on, that they can use to prepare. Because a lot of the time, a lot of stuff that happens in our hobbies, that's wargaming, that's even building miniatures or printing them, and then painting them, priming them, that kind of thing. But also coming up with strategies for your skirmish game or your tactical or strategic game or your role-playing game. A lot of the stuff happens between sessions as well. So for the DM, it's to come up with a story framework. Depending on how you're playing, the more open your world is, and if you've got a robust system, a rule set, you can have a really open world. You can come up with a couple of questions that you ask your players and say, okay, we're gonna build this world together. So I've come up with a basic setting, so something that I feel comfortable with and for which we have a rule set that works, and then to start you off, I've got one location. So that's what I'm planning on doing with my group. I've got one location. It's actually a big one. It's a city, which I've also populated with some things that they have a kind of like a starting framework. But a lot of the city simply has houses in it because I have a map, because I need a map. I'm a map person. I've always been a map person. And then they should build a character that fits and an NPC. Kind of like their sidekick, someone that their character knows that they can take with them, not like a henchman, but kind of like an anchor point in a way. And then come up with 2 locations that they have in the city that they would frequent, plus their own home. So they fill the city. And then we would have a couple of adventures in the city, and then we might leave the city. And then, what's outside? What's beyond the city gates? Think about what kind of merchants would there be? What kind of raw materials would be brought into the city? Okay, so let's say we've got an emerald mine. Okay, where would it be? And thus expanding the map more and more and more, like Dungeon World actually encourages you to do. Because in Dungeon World, you do all of this together with your group. Again, that's a 1-book rule set. That's all there is. That's what Dungeon World is. There is no supplements. It works. I'm not saying that the people who are publishing Dungeon World are getting rich, but it's the same with Monster of the Week. You have the 1 book. There is a supplement which basically gives you adventures, but you don't need it. I just bought it because I wanted some more information and background, which you don't need either, but I'm just somebody who likes reading stuff and who likes broadening her horizon, but you wouldn't need the supplement to play. So yes, it does work. But if you want to bring in people, you need to provide guidance and help to the DM, because they are your multipliers. It's not the players, it's actually the DM. So go away from focusing on the players and just throwing stuff at them because they will be buying stuff. Support the DM. Give the DM the possibility of building adventures easily, of providing them with input that they can use, like even scaling monsters, like kind of, a DM's toolbox. Because the DMs will bring in players, and players will at least buy the player's handbook. They may be buying, merchandise like dice, or like additional or lovely handcrafted character sheets. but concentrate on the DM and provide good adventures for those DMs that simply don't have the time or the inclination to build their own. Because most DMs, or all DMs I know, have always started out their career with pre-made adventures. And then they've spread out and started to build their own. So I guess I do have some advice, and that is concentrate on the DM. Give them what they need. Tools, easy access to even like an online database. You know, I want to briefly and quickly put together an encounter. So, okay, I've got fifth level PCs. Throw out some monsters that would work. Things like that. And there are websites that do this. I actually found one when I first created my first D&D 5th edition scenario. For my very first homemade encounter, I used this. Unfortunately, my PC nearly died because my monster critted, but it was okay in the end. But that's what DMs need. So you need to address them. So that's my 2 cents. And yeah, have a lovely rest of the day and talk to you soon. Bye-bye.